If you spill water on the main walkway again, I'll recommend replacing you with a robot. They're less prone to error. That sentence wasn't shouted, but it rang out clearly enough to weigh down the entire space. It was spoken in a soft, even almost offhand tone, as if she weren't a person, but merely a misplaced inconvenience. Denise stood there, hands still gripping the mop handle, head bowed, not a word in response. She didn't flush red, she didn't react. Not because she didn't feel anything, but because she was used to being treated like a shadow. Langston Enterprises, the global headquarters in Singapore, was a place where the air felt purer than the ideas. Cool LED lights reflected off white marble floors. Heels clicked softly as if floating above the ground. Every breath was calibrated by the aroma of perfectly brewed Kenyan coffee and just the right touch of French perfume. Here, everything was designed to showcase perfection, and everyone was trained to ignore what didn't serve that image. Denise was one of those things. A night shift janitor. The quietest shift. The most invisible. Her faded burgundy uniform nearly matched the floor. 13 years on the job. No one ever asked her name. No one remembered where she used to sit in the cafeteria. No one noticed until that morning. An elderly Chinese man stood confused in front of the digital directory. He kept fumbling with his invitation card, looking up, down, right and left. People passed by without stopping. Not out of malice, but because they didn't see him. A young security guard approached, speaking slowly in English. It didn't help. He sighed and walked away. Denise looked up, slipped her gloves back on, then paused and took them off again. She walked over and gently tapped the old man on the shoulder. Nin hao, shu yao bang mang ma, hello sir, may I help you? It wasn't a phrase learned from a phone app. It was the correct tone, the precise accent, like she was born in the heart of Shanghai. Less than a minute later, the man was shown the correct direction. He nodded, thankful, his face filled with gratitude. She turned back. A Colombian delivery worker stood scratching his head, confused by a misrouted shipment. Denise glanced at the order list and switched tongues. Buscas el edificio B, está al otro lado. The man's eyes widened, then broke into a relieved smile. And then, a French woman in a white suit. Cold expression, sharp features, glaring eyes. C'est ridicule. Le nom sur la salle est faux. This is ridiculous. The name on the conference room is wrong. No one responded. Denise stepped in. Madame, je suis désolée. La salle de conférence a été déplacée au 17e. Je peux vous y accompagner. The woman paused, looked at her, nodded. For the first time that morning, she smiled. 3 languages, 3 lost people. One person helped them find their way. No authority needed, no business card, no suit, just the willingness to listen and a skill no one had ever bothered to ask about. At the far end of the lobby, a man stopped walking. No one noticed him because he didn't want to be noticed. No assistant, no name badge, no signal to reveal that he was the most powerful person in the building. William Langston, CEO, founder of Langston Enterprises, the billionaire known for the quote that once silenced all of Wall Street. I don't need the press. I need results. He didn't take his eyes off Denise, not because she mopped the floor, but because she had just done something that the entire reception, logistics, and translation teams couldn't. He turned to the assistant next to him. His voice was low, but loud enough to change a life forever. Bring her to my office. Now. The 48th floor office wasn't a place anyone could enter without an invitation. But Denise, the same woman who just 10 minutes earlier had been bowing her head while cleaning the lobby floor, was now sitting in a high-backed Italian leather chair, facing a man whose name she had only ever seen on financial reports. No one escorted her. No one asked for her name. An assistant had simply come down and said, "Please follow me," as if everything had already been decided. Denise didn't know why she was there. She sat with her back straight, hands resting gently on her lap. Her eyes showed neither fear nor expectation. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. William Langston poured tea into two small white ceramic cups. No coffee, no contracts. Just tea, as if this weren't an executive suite, but rather an invitation into the space of someone who observes. "How many languages do you speak?" he asked without looking up. Denise paused for a second. 7, but fluent in 5. He gave a slight nod, as if he'd just heard a technical report. "Why did you choose this job?" "Because it doesn't require me to impress anyone." That answer made him look up. Their eyes met for the first time, not as interviewer and candidate, but as two people who had spent too long behind walls built on pretense. Denise didn't pretend. She didn't embellish herself. She didn't belittle herself either. And precisely that was what silenced William Langston. It wasn't a silence of pity, but of recognition. He slid a cup of tea toward her. "I'm looking for someone who understands how people function. Not data. Not reports," he said, his voice steady like the marble floor beneath them. "And I just saw that in you under hallway lights among 3 strangers no one else thought worth helping." Denise didn't respond. She didn't breathe a sigh of relief. She simply stayed quiet, as if for the first time in 13 years someone was seeing her, not because of a mistake, but because of her strength. What awaited her wasn't a compliment. It was an offer, a challenge, a turning point that William Langston had never extended to anyone without an Ivy League degree. He placed his hand lightly on the table and spoke the words that made the leather chair beneath her feel like it had disappeared. "I want you to step away from cleaning for a while and take charge of one of my pilot offices as a trainee manager." Denise lifted her head slightly. Her eyes weren't exactly surprised. They were wary, as if throughout her life, nothing good ever came without some quiet cost lurking behind it. "A pilot office?" she asked, her voice still calm, but her gaze as sharp as a blade. William Langston didn't answer immediately. He gently turned the teacup in his hand, then replied in a neutral tone, "I'm giving you a small space, a mid-level team. I don't expect outstanding results. I just want to see, if no one underestimates you, who might you become." That statement wasn't an offer. It was a test, a mental trap wrapped in the polished language of the ultra-rich, where empowerment always comes with invisible oversight. Denise stayed silent, but this time not because of caution. It was because she recognized something familiar, a challenge, a quiet way of saying, "You're not qualified, but I'm giving you a chance to prove me wrong, so I'll have a reason to dismiss you." She looked him directly in the eye. No hesitation, no smile. "You won't regret it," she replied, not as a request, but as a declaration. William smirked. It wasn't a smile. It was a look only seasoned CEOs would understand, the kind of smirk that comes after watching hundreds of people fall because of their own confidence. 3 days later, Denise walked into the pilot office, a place once jokingly referred to as the human resource dumping ground. No welcome sign, no orientation, no clear explanation of her role. The looks she received when she entered were cold, sharp, and slightly amused. A janitor now oversees a team that had once graded her through internal performance reports. One assistant whispered, "Must be connected," or got off on the wrong floor. But Denise didn't care. She gave a faint smile. She remembered every face that had once refused to wipe their shoes as they walked past her mop. She didn't need authority. She needed time. and one mistake from them. Just one would be enough. The first week passed, like the surface of a mirror, quiet to the point of suspicion. Denise maintained a steady rhythm, never flashy. She didn't try to impress anyone, nor did she invoke William's name to force obedience. She simply did things right fast, and more thoroughly than anyone thought a former janitor could. But it was that very calmness, her quiet efficiency, that made those long-seated in swivel chairs feel uneasy. They started small, failing to relay full meeting agendas, deliberately sending emails at off hours and rescheduling meetings without notifying her. One document that required her signature was accidentally left locked in a cabinet. An internal report vanished due to a file name conflict. Outwardly, they still smiled, still addressed her as Miss Denise in syrupy tones. But beneath the surface, each small act was a thorn, building a silent barricade meant to push her back to where they believed she belonged beneath them. The climax came on a Friday. A mid-year financial report meant only for the board was leaked. And in that file, the final approving name was Denise Atwater. Internal alerts went off. William Langston said nothing. But his senior assistant, the man, once a contender for branch director, began appearing in the pilot office like a shadow. The atmosphere shifted. People who once nodded now turned away. Some employees even smirked when Denise entered the meeting room. A perfect narrative was being constructed to prove one thing: she doesn't deserve this. Denise didn't speak. She didn't explain. She continued arriving on time and kept her tone even during conversations. But every night, she stayed behind, alone, opening system files, cross-checking login logs, and matching IP addresses. And then, she found a string of code embedded in the document. No one would have expected it, except someone who had learned to code at 13 because she couldn't afford school and had taught herself late at night using old technical books at a public library. Denise printed the evidence, folded it neatly, and placed it in an envelope. On Monday, she walked over to the senior assistant's desk, the one who had once accidentally forwarded the wrong document. She said nothing, just placed the envelope down, smiled, and walked away. 1 week from now, the board meeting will be held, and Denise, the woman who once held a mop, would walk in carrying a truth no one ever saw coming. The board meeting was held on the 33rd floor, a level only those with alpha-level access cards were permitted to enter. Denise had no such card, but that morning a direct message from William Langston reached the executive office: bring Ms. Atwater to the 33rd floor, seat 9. The rumor spread faster than the elevator. The woman who once mopped the floors was now sitting at the same table as regional directors. Something didn't add up. Some laughed, some were nervous. But no one dared stop her, because now, behind the name Denise Atwater, was William's digital signature. The room was as silent as a frozen lake. White lighting reflected off the glass table, making the entire setting feel more like a tribunal than a corporate meeting. William sat at the head, hands folded. When the senior assistant walked in, a shadow passed across his eyes. Then he looked at Denise. "Seems you have something to say." Denise didn't thank him. She didn't take a deep breath. She simply placed an envelope on the table. The internal document was leaked. Everyone assumed it was me. She looked each person in the eye. No bowing, no fear. But I found a string of code embedded in the fake document. This is the server log. It includes the IP address, the timestamp, and the responsible party. A regional director frowned. "Are you accusing someone?" Denise turned directly toward the senior assistant, the man who once sat in the very chair she now occupied. "I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just putting the facts on the table. If anyone feels targeted, perhaps they should reflect on why. No one spoke. It was William who broke the silence. You spent 13 years here, invisible, and in just 3 weeks, you've made this entire system take a hard look in the mirror. He turned to the secretary. Revoke Nathan Shaw's 33rd floor access, indefinitely. Then he looked back at Denise. And upgrade the pilot office to official branch status. Denise is in charge. There was no applause. No one dared cheer, because they all knew a tremor had just begun. A woman once humiliated in the lobby was now rewriting how the empire functioned, and the man who thought he could bury her with deceit was now walking out of the room with no one seeing him off. They thought she would change, that once she had power, Denise would become like them, domineering, suspicious, and controlling. But Denise didn't choose to speak louder. She chose to listen deeper. She didn't shout slogans or hang new culture posters in the hallway. She did one simple thing: she started asking the right people. In her first week, she cancelled all standing meetings. Instead, she walked through each department, sat in side chairs, brewed her own coffee, and asked each employee, "What here makes you feel like you're not enough?" Not everyone answered, but they saw it a woman who once mopped the floors, now asking them, as professionals, without a hint of sarcasm or judgment. And bit by bit, the pilot office now, officially a branch, began to shift. An Indian man who had long been mocked for his heavy accent was put in charge of internal communications. A young woman with a disability, once rejected from interviews just for being in a wheelchair, was personally invited by Denise to join the data analytics team. Then, during a month-end meeting, Denise did something no one expected. She made all employee salaries and benefits public. We can't talk about fairness if no one knows what the standard is. She said, her voice low but firm. I used to be in a position where every raise felt like a question with no answer. I won't let that happen to someone else. Those who once scoffed at her went silent, and those who had lived in silence began to step into the light. They didn't just work harder. They began to believe that their efforts could actually be seen. A mid-level analyst previously overlooked discovered a system bug that had gone unnoticed for 2 years. Denise didn't celebrate him with a speech. She simply sent one company-wide email. Sometimes silence is the foundation for the greatest changes. Today, let's thank Joseph, who just saved us $400,000 in operational costs. That email, not a revenue report, was what made the Langston office erupt. People no longer whispered behind her back. They whispered to each other, "She's actually changing this system." Langston Enterprises was entering a restructuring phase. A $2 billion merger with a foreign conglomerate was under quiet negotiation. Denise wasn't involved, at least not officially, but a financial contract was accidentally sent to her office, one that listed questionable expenditures, temporary disbursement allocations worth millions with no clear destinations. She checked internal codes, digital signatures, authentication data. Everything was valid, and all of it led back to one name: William Langston. Denise's heart sank like a stone. The man who had changed her life, who had once given her a chance with no conditions, was now at the center of a shadowy paper trail. She wanted to believe it was a mistake, a technical error, but the deeper she dug, the clearer it became. William was transferring money through shell entities to manipulate the merger and retain full control without board oversight. Denise stayed late in her office. She stared at the contract copy and the handwritten thank you card William had left on her desk. On her first day, "I believe in you even when this system hasn't yet learned how to see you." Now, she was holding the truth that could destroy him. The next morning, Denise requested a private meeting with William. The boardroom felt darker, not because of the lights, but because of the silence between two people who had once stood on the same side. I saw the documents. She began, eyes locked on his. William didn't deny it. He sighed. I saved this system from bankruptcy once, and now I'm trying to save it again in a way not everyone will understand. Denise replied, her voice hoarse but steady. But I wasn't given a chance to understand. I was given a chance to do what's right. There was no argument, no raised voices, just a quiet nod from William. Then he said, "If you choose to bring this to light, I won't stop you. But remember, I didn't choose you because you were good. I chose you because I thought you'd be like me." Denise stood up. She didn't respond, but her eyes did. The next day, she submitted all the evidence to the Internal Investigation Committee, anonymously, leaving no trace, but enough to begin unraveling the truth. William withdrew from the merger. He announced his retirement, citing health reasons. The media knew nothing. But on the 17th floor, where Denise's new boardroom was located, every employee stood silently as they saw the chair that once bore his name. Now empty. One team member asked, "Aren't you afraid he might come back?" Denise gave a quiet smile. "If he does, I'll say the same thing. Because the only reason I've survived in this world is that I never became a copy of anyone else." 3 months after William Langston announced his resignation, an internal memo was released, not written by the PR director, not stamped with any glossy logo. Just a plain white sheet of paper bearing a single line. As of today, Denise Atwater is appointed Chief Ethics and People Innovation Officer, not CEO, not William's successor. But that title alone made the entire corporation fall silent, because no one ever imagined that a woman once reprimanded for wetting a VIP guest's shoes while mopping the floor would now have the authority to approve or veto any hiring contract in this billion-dollar company. Denise didn't celebrate. She didn't hold a press conference. On her first day in the role, she simply sent one email with the subject line, "It's time we start listening again." And so, Langston Enterprises began to change, not with loud proclamations, but through details no one had ever noticed before. A blind recruitment system was implemented, removing names, gender, and nationality from first-round applicant screenings. A new break room was opened next to the executive suite, designed specifically for janitors, delivery workers, and security staff, with the exact same meal options as management. An internal equity fund was launched, allowing any employee who had once been misjudged to renominate themselves on one condition: they must also nominate someone else they believed had never been truly seen. Everything began to change, bit by bit, no glitter, but deep down to the roots. Then one afternoon, as Denise was preparing to leave the office, a figure stood, waiting in the hallway. No one had announced his visit. No one dared speak, because it was William Langston. He wore no suit, brought no assistant, just a man older than before, his gaze gentler and his voice deeper than it had ever been. "You didn't take the easy path. And because of that, we still have a chance to make things right." Denise didn't answer. She simply looked at him. No more anger, no more fear. Just the quiet steadiness of someone who had weathered storms on her own feet. When William turned to leave, no one saw him off. But he looked back, once smiled, and gave a slight nod as a silent thank you to the woman who had once kept him awake for 3 nights, pondering the meaning of kindness. Dear friend, if the story of Denise Atwater moved you, perhaps it wasn't because she spoke many languages or because she became a director at a global corporation. It was because she dared to hold on to kindness in a world where people often trample one another to get ahead. She wasn't wealthy. She wasn't flashy, but she had something rarer than money, the strength not to become what once hurt her. So what's the lesson here? That sometimes you don't need power to make an impact. You just need the courage to do what's right when no one else will, the strength to stand firm when others turn their backs, and the faith that even quiet kindness can shift an entire system. The biggest message I see here is this: you don't need to be a hero to change the world. You just need to be yourself. Live right, do right, and never let go of the good, no matter how small. My personal belief, I truly believe that every time we choose kindness in a cold world, we warm it just a little. And those little moments, when added together, create permanent change. If you've ever been misjudged, cast aside, or told you weren't good enough, remember this: your worth isn't defined by where you stand, but by how you treat others when you have nothing to offer.